The most dangerous property deals are not always the most obvious. They might look fine right up until the day you sign the deal and you're now the owner, and it won't be long after before you realize you've made a mistake. Now, I've been investing in property for about 30 years. I've had some great success with some really nice deals, but I've also bought some real lemons where I have made a big mistake. I've regretted it very soon after completing on the deal. But ultimately, I think the best lessons are usually the biggest mistakes that you've made. And so let's get into that today. The day you buy is the day you sell. And I definitely think that applies in the case of these three properties. Number one, over the shop. This is in the news a lot nowadays because the local authorities are offering grants where you buy a property that's potentially apartments over a shop. You can actually get money for this, and there's various incentives. And so it is attractive as an investment where you buy a place, convert it, and then you're getting money from the government or from the local authority to do that. Attractive as let's say a developer or as the person who's kind of taking advantage of that opportunity. But if you're the person thinking of buying an apartment over the shop, then you have to give it some thought because there's quite a few issues. In the past, I bought an apartment directly on the second floor above a fast food takeaway restaurant, Abrakabra. Those of you in Ireland, you'll know exactly what Abrakabra is. Abrakabra, they sell kebabs and they're open very late at night. And they cook these kebabs in the restaurant. There's deep fat fryers and whatever. When you step into your apartment, the stink is just insane. And it seemed to permeate every square inch of the building. I remember putting the key in the door, walking in, and this smell hitting you in the face.
Hey, brah?
Yeah?
You'd go up the 2 flights of stairs to my second floor apartment, go in, open up my own door, close it, thinking that I'll have some refuge, and the smell was in there too. So that was a really difficult thing to get used to. I used to go and open the window. If I opened the window at the back, the extractor fans from the kitchen would be blowing that crappy smell into my apartment. So I would open the windows on the front of the building. But of course, it was a busy street in Dublin, and you had the buses and you had the cars and you had the traffic. So you had all the exhaust fumes coming in. So I could rarely get any kind of relief from the smell. The next thing is noise. Having an apartment over a shop, and in particular a fast food restaurant or any kind of food use, can be a real problem. First of all, we mentioned the smells. You've also got the deliveries first thing in the morning, like at 6 a.m. they are delivering food. Second of all, you got the late night opening. And so particularly the takeaway fast food places, they open late and they attract people that are coming from the pub or from the clubs. You end up with a rowdy kind of gang going in and out of these places. Now, I remember coming home late one night and there'd been a big gang and somebody had just drank way too much, and you're having to step over pools of vomit and stuff like that. It was just awful living in this location. Another time, coming down from inside the building, trying to open the door and something blocking the doorway. And I found out that it's a guy basically sleeping in the doorway. And, it's very hard to push when somebody is like asleep at the door. So a lot of this stuff was very negative, and I just suddenly realized, oh wow, I've made a big mistake here. Vermin, food waste. Coming from restaurants and takeaway and stuff like that. They put the food out in bins out the back. That attracts rats, mice, seagulls, pigeons. Like, you'll end up with all of this stuff at the back of the building. And rats in particular, they can get in through all sorts of ducts and openings and stuff. And in apartment buildings, they tend to have what we call duct risers. And so it's a riser where the cables go up through the building, and rats can go up those quite easily and they can get into the higher floors. If there is a restaurant operating on the ground floor and you're in an apartment above, there is an increased fire risk. Now, that's obviously for your safety. That is something that you need to think about. Fat fires are quite common in restaurants and stuff. But the other thing that it does is insurers are aware of that added risk. And so what does that mean? It means that you now have premiums that are a lot higher for that type of building. The number of apartments in the building, when I bought my place on Westmoreland Street, that was just 4 apartments, 1 on each floor over the restaurant. That meant that when the bills came in, there was only 4 people sharing the cost of that insurance premium. And so it was quite hefty. I can remember being taken aback, actually. That would definitely be a use that I would not buy again. Maybe an apartment over a cafe, that's probably okay, because they tend not to open that late, but definitely not a fast food takeaway restaurant or anything like that. Property number 2. Vacant commercial units. I did a video on commercial versus residential just quite recently. I was talking about the pros and cons of commercial units. And when a commercial unit is occupied, it is a great investment. But when it is vacant, it's an entirely different proposition. The dynamic is so different, and you've got to be real careful not to fall into the trap of thinking that you'll rent it easily, because you may not be able to rent it as easily as you think. When it's for sale, the shop unit itself, if it's empty, the brochure will show you a nice shop, maybe it'll even have some sort of an artist's impression of what it could look like, or they'll use AI or whatever. That is all great, but getting the tenant in there is a different story. And if it's vacant, it's going to take you some time to find a tenant. And when the tenant does come knocking on the door, they have all the bargaining power, because you have an empty unit costing you money, and they could go to a number of other units in that area. The only time when there's an exception there is in streets with very high footfall. Think Grafton Street or Henry Street. Those places have huge footfalls, which is why the rents are so high. But in a place that doesn't have high footfall, you're going to struggle. There is a thing called tenant inducements, right? When a unit is vacant and you want to go and get a person to go and sign up for it, you're going to have to offer them a certain incentive for them to kind of come in. And a lot of the time, they're going to have to spend money fitting out their store. The money that they need to spend is an investment into the property. And a lot of the time, they're going to negotiate with their landlord to give them some of that in the form of rent-free. So you will have a situation where you're going to be asked to provide a rent-free period to your tenant. Now you can say no and watch the tenant walk away, and that's the end of your opportunity. So you've got to take this. It's quite common that you would give maybe 6 months rent-free for a new tenant to sign a lease, and they'll take that time to fit out their unit. They're not on rent straight away because they're maybe decorating or whatever they need to do. The trick with a vacant commercial unit is to try to buy it as a vacant unit. Make sure it hasn't been priced as an occupied unit. You'll always see the agents sort of selling it as, here's what the notional rent could be, and they price it based on that. But you have to achieve that for it actually to be worth that. And so what we used to do, and this is one of the strategies that I teach inside my Accelerator, we used to have the tenant in your back pocket essentially, and you would buy the unit as a vacant unit, and then when you've signed for it, that's when you pull the tenant out and you actually, you have them pre-signed. That's a great way to do it because you're de-risking the deal for yourself. But I would not buy a unit without having that pre-signed tenant. It happened to me years ago, and I ended up 9 years trying to find a tenant. Those 9 years were just the most frustrating because I was paying rates, I was paying interest on the bank loan, I was paying all this stuff. After 9 years of futile attempts to fill the unit, I ended up just putting it in an auction and selling it. And I ended up selling it for 20% of the purchase price. Like, we lost 80% of our money on that deal. We had actually, with myself and my business partner, we used to joke about, this deal is a no-brainer, because we thought we were going to double our money. And we ended up losing 80% of our money. So both of us agreed that we would never use the term no-brainer again. If a unit is vacant, it is like the market has cast a vote on the location. If it's vacant, that is like a red flag. Make sure you're paying attention to the signals from the market. Number 3, finally, the rural one-off house. Last week, I posted a video on what €375,000 can buy you here in Ireland. And I used the example of this house showing you on the screen now in Roscommon. It is on 1.6 acres and it's a big 6-bedroom house. And as an example of value for money compared to, say, the 1-bedroom apartment in Dublin that I also compared it with, it's incredible. Like, it's basically 1/8 the price per square meter. However, there is a huge amount to consider here. First of all, there's probably no rental demand whatsoever for that property. Buy that property thinking you're going to rent it out, you might have another thing coming. If it's for yourself, different story perhaps. One of the things to look for, public transport. In a rural location, zero public transport. So that rules out a large segment of the population that may think about renting it from you. The more rural it is, the more limited the pool of potential buyers for you to sell it. So you end up with a very illiquid asset. You could end up in a situation where there is only one person interested in buying your property when you're trying to get out, and it might be the neighbor who happens to own a farm, and it's like, oh, we can add to the farm. Those guys know how to negotiate. Do not expect to get out with a good deal in that situation. One of the other things about rural properties is septic tanks. You are not on mains water, you're not on mains sewer, and all of that has to be maintained by yourself. If you've bought a property that doesn't have mains water connection, it means that you actually have to have a well. You have to maintain a well to collect water. If you're on septic tank, those things, they can break down occasionally and you have to look after that, and it is not a pleasant job. So have a think about these things. If you're buying a property as a forever home in a rural location, and maybe your parents grew up there or whatever, you grew up there, that's a different story. But if you're thinking about this, if you're weighing up like property values, Dublin versus Drogheda versus Roscommon, as I did in that particular last video, you're going to find that it looks like great value, but it is a big red flag for me, and I would not go near that kind of property. The other thing to think about is isolation. So you might have grown up in the area, but does your partner, do they feel the same about that location? Partners, as in, your wife or your husband or whatever, they may feel quite isolated in that location. And so you need to think about that. If you're raising children in that area, do they have friends nearby? I'm living here in a development that we built, and we have kids all around the place, and my kids run out the door and there's loads of kids for them to play with. Not the same when you're living in a rural location. So have a think about that. The price per square foot can be quite enticing, but it can be a bit of a red herring. You've got to be a little bit careful about that. Don't get caught. Now, those are the 3 properties I would avoid. If you want to know what properties I would go for and what are the ones that I would love to have, you're going to need to hit subscribe and catch it in the next video. Guys, if you found that video useful, please do me a favor and hit like there. And if you know anyone who's out there thinking about buying a property, maybe share it with them if you think they would do with the benefit of knowing some of those tips themselves. So hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next one.